Hello and welcome to the Cameo Show. I'm your host, Cameo, and today we have the pleasure of hosting Ms. Allie Rogers. She's a visionary storyteller with a passion for adventure. You never know where you're going to see her show up, and a deep connection to the human experience. So welcome, Allie. I'm so excited to have you on today's episode.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Of course. And we also have my trusty co-host, Mr. Greg Braun. Hi, Greg.
Good morning, everybody. How we doing?
And Greg likes to start us with a dad joke. So are you loaded up?
Yes, this one's going to make you chuckle.
Okay.
Why don't eggs like to tell each other jokes? Because they'll crack each other up.
Chuckle I do every single time. Allie is typically behind the camera through her beautiful storytelling with many different people, from the likes of Rich Roll to Colin O'Brady to events like 29029, which is where I was first introduced to you. Mm-hmm. I didn't actually get to meet you then. I just saw you kind of like lurking in the bushes as I was climbing up the mountain. And then, of course, you know, we see all of the wonderful footage from that event. And it was Prana Lens, which is your visionary. You're the mastermind behind that. And so we've connected a couple of times since then. I've been fortunate to follow along your journey. And like I said, it's been really fun to kind of see, like, where is Allie? You're always somewhere, and it's always like the most beautiful place ever, it seems. And nature and just gorgeous. So I'm curious in getting to know Allie a little bit more, like, how did this all come to be? Like, how did you get started in storytelling and working with these people and these events? Because you have just such an amazing eye for it. Is it something that you as a little girl were into? Like, where did it begin? Take us way back.
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of this in doing, I don't know if you've done a lot of, Enneagram or human design or any of these types of personality astrology related things. What often comes up for me always is this, like, a seeker of beauty and just a cutting beneath the surface, like wanting to always go deep. What's the layer beneath the layer beneath the layer? And just like both, that seeking out new terrains, new vistas, more beauty, more depth, more of like the actual, I guess, human experience deep down. And like the combination of those two, I think, is so ingrained in me. And I don't think that that's anything I learned over time. I think that's just always been a part of me. And you know how you spend most of your life thinking everybody feels the same way you do. And then as you get to a certain point in your adulthood, you're like, oh, I'm very different from everybody. That's one of the things that I think it just has always been, I'm grateful, has always been just kind of the natural default for me. So it's been impossible. I tried a 9-to-5 one time and couldn't do it. I just always have to be in a beautiful place or seeking out beautiful experiences and people who are doing really interesting things. And I kind of, like, growing up in Minnesota, that wasn't, Minnesota's not that exciting. And I remember my family traveled a lot, but it wasn't until I went to college in Colorado, and that opened up my world a lot. And then I did a lot of travel projects. So I studied abroad in Madagascar. I got funding to do a thesis project in French Polynesia. And then I lived in New Zealand for a year after college, and the Cook Islands, and was really pursuing this whole like island photojournalism, island culture. And I grew up going to a French immersion school. So French and other cultures was always something that I had in my back pocket. And I just remember always having that desire to go out and capture something, bring it back for people, put it together in a beautiful storytelling type of way. And that's just always been something that I've done as a passion. And, grew my business throughout my 20s, living in Minneapolis, doing other things, commercial work, weddings, things that were a little more normal. But on the side, I would always do these passion projects and beauty seeking and wellness and yoga and health and vitality and all the stuff that I was personally passionate about. I would just use my creative skills to create something with that and meet other people who were doing similar things that I could capture and tell their story. And it was such a mutually beneficial. I remember having so many friends in my 20s who were super talented musicians or yogis or speakers. And it was like, it allowed me to foster my skills by capturing them. And it was an outlet for me and beneficial for them. I worked with a lot of yoga studios and conferences during that time too. And I think just like one thing led to another along that path. I remember in Minneapolis, there's this gym open called Fly Feet, and it was really intense. I don't know if you've ever been to Barry's, but it's kind of that idea. Professional soccer coach would lead the classes with everyday humans like myself. And felt like I was dying. I was at the edge of myself every single time. It was very athlete. And I never done anything that was like hardcore athlete style stuff before. I'd done yoga classes and like more chill strength training and things like that. And this cracked something open in me. And at the same time, I was listening to Rich Roll's podcast. And I remember putting together this edit just purely out of inspiration because I was also shooting for this running gym studio. It's that kind of place. It was this dark room and they had just like a few neon green lights. It was like a very intense setting. And it was right around the solstice, so the darkest part of the year. And I remember I wanted to just do a passion project for them. So I took some anecdote, like some sound bites from Rich's podcast where different guests were talking about the solstice and darkness and hitting your edge. And some of it was athletic, some of it was spiritual people. David Goggins was one of the voices I used. It was just such a vast array of people. And I just sent it to Rich's website, just like the basic contact form on a website. And you're like, I'm just going to cover my bases legally and be like, hey, I'm used some of your podcast in this video that I was doing for this local running gym. Want to make sure you're cool with it. Yeah, it wasn't like, here's my work, I want to work for you,
Yeah.
but it was just this very like synchronistic. And I love the way this is my lens on life in general, is that there's no way I could have planned this. But what happened was a couple weeks later, his wife, Julie, on his podcast gave out her email address. I don't remember why, but there was something that she had said in the podcast that resonated with me. So I just reached out to her on a very personal level, just being like, loved what you shared. I resonate with this, and this is why, and And my website signature is at the bottom of all my emails. And so she must have clicked on it, seeing Prana Lens, that maybe like, was interesting to her. So she opened it up and she was like, wow. And I had traveled to California a lot in my 20s for just, again, seeking beauty. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of stuff on there that made her feel like, wow, she would be a good fit for Rich, because at the time he wasn't happy with his video person. And so it just started a conversation. And what's funny is she showed Rich, she was like, hey, check out this website. And he's like, so weird. I actually saw that website a couple of days ago. And his business partner had flagged my email and showed him the video and showed him so like through multiple arenas, he'd gotten my contact, or he'd seen my website or something. The reason I tell like that as kind of a long story is like that led to a bunch of conversations. And then I ended up going out to California and working with him. And that in and of itself, that has other stories into it. But sure. Going back to what I was saying is like, it just all started with pure artistic passion. Like, I just want to create this thing and I'm inspired by this podcast, and here we go. I'm just putting it out in the world. And then it just like, it's very meant to be. And from Rich, I obviously have met everybody that is everything to me right now. Like 29 to 29, I wouldn't have known about that if it wasn't for Rich. The first 29 to 29 I shot, I was supposed to go to capture Rich and to do a story around Rich there. And then Rich bailed at the last minute. And I was like, do you guys still want me to come? And
really?
Yeah. And Mark and I talked about what I would do. And because I had some visions, obviously beyond just Rich, for wanting to be part of that. And so we did like a little test trial run that time. And it was the first event after COVID. So there was so much emotion, so much vulnerability, so much storytelling. It was beautiful. It was hot. There was a lot to that event that like having somebody like me capturing people's emotion, like people feel safe with me. People want to talk to me. I want to talk. Like there's something about that I'm able to do at these events that they hadn't had up till that point. It all been like for show from the outside and all about being like really hardcore. And that's still part of it too. But there was this emotional vulnerability, transformational element of storytelling that wasn't there before, that we kind of started doing at that event. And obviously I met Colin through Rich Roll's podcast, and I work really closely with him now, and I don't think that would have happened otherwise. It's like you look back on all these things and it's like it all comes back to just like, passion. With Colin, it was a similar thing where like it was his second time on Rich's podcast when I was like, dear God, what
Right.
Who is
this human? Is this person human?
Yeah, he's crazy, intense, badass, but also mostly he's just so sweet and kind and heartfelt and well-spoken. And I was like, this is interesting. And I remember reaching out to him afterwards, and the typical, like, if you're messaging someone on Instagram and it's like, yeah, shoot me an email and we'll connect. And, like people who are really successful and have a lot going on, they typically are not responding, at least in my experience. It's not very common, but there's the cordial, like, yeah, here's my email, let's connect.
Yeah.
So I emailed Colin, and I remember he was like, yeah, we should chat sometime, or like nothing, there was no next step. And who's to say if there would have been or not otherwise. But what I did that night, and again, this was not calculated in any way. It was purely, again, inspired passion. But after hearing him that day on Rich's podcast, I pulled up another podcast of his that he'd recently done and pulled some sound bites from that and put together a video that night using some footage of him on YouTube that I'd found. It had an arc, and it was like,
yeah,
there was emotion to it. And I sent it to him the next day. Within 5 minutes, I got an email back that was like, can you talk right now?
You can't go anywhere. I need to talk to you right now. That's amazing. I love everything that you're talking about here, because it starts with Allie following her passion. So if we can back up a second, I just want to unpack a couple of things. You mentioned like you tried a 9 to 5. What did Allie think she wanted to do when she grew up? After, you go to school, I'm going to get a job. What did you think you wanted to do? And what kind of 9 to 5s did you try that maybe felt like, I'm not passionate about this, even though I think I should be, or maybe I'm supposed to be, or this is what you're supposed to do when you grow up. What did that look like for you?
I mean, when I was a little kid, there's like these home movies of me saying, I want to be an artist. So I guess I tuned into that at an early age, or I want to be a vet or something like that. But in my more young adult life, I think I never saw anything. I was just like, oh, at some point I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll work in advertising. Maybe I'll work in, I had a stepdad who was very by the book of it needs to be, my dad was a neurosurgeon, my mom was a nurse, my stepdad was an accountant type person, my brother's an accountant, like everybody's got a very normal job. And so I just thought, I'll figure out at some point, but I didn't really ever have a strict vision. And the 9 to 5s that I tried, it was somewhere in my early 20s where I would try, tutoring, or I always tried to find things that had somewhat of flexibility or human to human interaction. It never even entered my ether to think about going to an office and sitting in a cubicle type thing. I worked at a Veda corporate but this was on the video team. This is where I felt like, oh, I've made it. But it was still felt like a box, because it was corporate, and it was 9 to 5 and hour for lunch and sit in a room with no windows, and like
not very inspiring, right?
No,
I
had a great, like the guy who ran that team, it was myself, one other editor, and then the guy who ran the video team, and then one other guy. But he was a great mentor, and he was very like, I learned a lot about editing, and it helped me out in so many ways. But I remember, I can't believe I did this now in hindsight, but I remember I was working on wedding video edits while I was at my corporate job, where I'd like go out for a walk when I was supposed to be in the office. Like I could not.
She's a rule breaker, folks.
She's a rebel.
Rule breaker.
Not meant for corporate.
I asked that question because I think that it's pretty relatable that people, have this passion. Greg and I can speak to this for ourselves with regard to our music or our athletics. Like, we have this passion, but then you reach that point in your young adult life or your adult life where you're like, well, I have to kind of figure it out and fall into some kind of mold, because now I have to support myself, or how do I blend my passion with what I can do to survive, right?
Yeah.
And so it sounds like, you kind of fell into that, but also just hung on and clung tightly to the fact that like you were leading with your heart and with your passion.
yeah, I feel like it was just a very naive approach to it in the sense where it's like, I can't, this is the only option.
Yeah.
Luckily I was young and my bills were small, but
Sure.
yeah, kind of having that mentality of like, this is going to be what it's going to be. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. And taking chances to go live in other countries and explore, like, how did those opportunities come up? Did you seek those out? Were they things that you connected with other people? Because those are pretty amazing. Like Madagascar, are you kidding me? New Zealand, like,
Yeah.
wow.
Lemurs.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, again, I feel really grateful and fortunate that I got to go to Colorado College. It's a very like that was the community there. That was the baseline. Everybody seemed to be doing interesting things, or the teachers. So it was on a block plan. You have one class at a time for 3.5 weeks, and then you're on a block break. And so it was a lot of adventurous people. It's a lot of worldly type of like people, because you only have one class at a time. Your class could go to the Grand Canyon for 3 weeks. Your class could go somewhere else and go camping or go do a thing. And it was like a very project-based approach to life, or to school. And so then I think like it was natural to take that into life. So I had a lot of encouragement just from the people that I was around, the professors that I was around, the community, because I remember Madagascar got suggested to me by someone 2 years older than me who was also in French, was a French major. And she was like, well, yeah, you can go to France like everyone, or you could go to Madagascar. They speak French. Like, I was like, ooh, that's a little scary, but that sounds great. I was.
Did you go alone?
No, it was a study abroad program, and there were actually 3 other people from my college, and then 5 others from other parts of the country, and nothing has ever compared to that in my entire life since then. The way we bonded, what's that quote about, like, you know, in suffering you bond together or something like that. But they were like the closest thing they're closer than any brother or sister I could imagine having. That group was, because we got malaria, we got bugs in our feet, we were constantly like throwing up, we were traveling all over the country together, because it was a roaming, it wasn't like we're at a schoolhouse, we were in homestays at a schoolhouse for like the first month, but then after that we were traveling around in a rickety bus. In hindsight, I cannot believe that our parents like they had to sign for this to happen. Right. The fact that we didn't die is out of control. But yeah, things like that, where it's like I never in a million years in my Minnesota upbringing would have thought to go to Madagascar for study abroad, but it's just like somebody suggested it, and I had like cracked open this adventurous side of me by living in Colorado and getting into backpacking and doing all these things that weren't my normal MO. And so you start to, and you know this from your own lifestyles, and you like start to get a little bit out of your comfort zone doing a few things, and it's exciting, and you like who you are, and you go a little further and you go a lither further into it. And before you know it, you're like, oh, you know, a year ago I wouldn't have made that jump, but I did all these little jumps along the way, and it's like, no, that's not that bad, or like that's not that far jump.
Yes, I love that. That's a great way to break it down, those small steps that make the bigger ones seem a little less daunting because you've done all the small ones along the way. And like you said something about the group that you're with and the people that you're around and how that influenced you, and how that's so important. Like, you are who you hang out with. And so being there and around the influence and surrounded by other people who were doing that opened up a whole new world for you. And you just were like, okay, let's do this, jump in. Like, it's who I am anyway. And maybe a sense of permission from other people being that way too, and courage that was inspired. So that's awesome. And then that translates into Rich Roll and into Colin O'Brady and into these events that now you are who you hang out with, and you continue to push yourself to do cool things because you're surrounded by people who do cool things. And like, you were doing it anyway. That's awesome about sending. Like, I love that you just shared that story about sending an email to Rich's wife, or about submitting, like, to just make sure your bases were covered. You could have not.
Because how many people have these ideas and then talk themselves out of it because of fear, and they don't want to look stupid, and they don't want to get rejected, and you're just like, we are the same. I mean, I have freaking chills. We're the same way. It's like, tell me what shot I need to shoot, because who the hell knows? You know what I mean? And then it's just like, from there, look at your life, you know, from one thing, you know. It's insane.
And I have so many countless stories of that where it's like, I have a vision for something on a podcast inspired me. And I was like, oh, I want to do a video project around that. And I reached out to the guy in Australia, whatever. And then he was like, and then I reached out to Zach Bush, and then this other couple that's like sort of famous in Australia that has a podcast. And I never thought everybody would say yes, but they all said yes. And I was like, oh shit, now I got to like do the project. Or like, I'm talking to Chris Burkhardt right now about working on something together. And I was like, why does he want to work with me? But he does. So like, let me figure this out.
Yeah.
It's kind of that whole, just do it first. Or just
just start before you're ready.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like shoot the shot. It's already a no. And if you don't ask, it's definitely a no. So shoot the shot, ask, and then look at how this has all transpired. So from Rich to Colin to Jesse to the events that you go to the people that you've connected with you never thought you would, what are some of your favorite experiences? And like, I want to know some of the most wild things that you've done behind the camera, and not to carry on the question any further, but I also want to know what that did for you, Allie, as a person. Like, not just I'm capturing the shot, but like, I know you were hanging out of a van window capturing Colin on his bike. I want to know, what did that do for Allie too? Because the shot was awesome.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Were you like, oh my God, I'm hanging out of a van window. What am I doing? This is insane. This is absolute insanity.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. Just like that, actually, the hanging out the window was like no big deal to me. But in the moment I was like, this is so cool. And I was like, this shot looks so cool. He looks so professional. And the sun was hitting the van, and the van was white, and it was bouncing off onto Colin on the bike. And I was like, other people pay like $50,000 for this shot with their fancy equipment or whatever. And we got it just organically right now. And I'm hanging out a window, and this is amazing. Those moments are really phenomenal. But just to kind of back up and like a zoom out answer to that, one thing I'll say first is, again, going back to like, I'm just a very soulful, spiritual, sensitive, again, I'm from Minnesota. Like, the thing, when I look at all of this, the thing that I'm most grateful for, and that has like really impacted me the most in working with all these people, is it's helped me grow into a more confident and directive. Like, coming into working with these people, I was very like, oh my God, everything was I was very sensitive. I didn't speak up very much. I was not very, I don't know. I've seen myself grow so much in working with these people, being inspired by who they are and what they're doing, but also in stepping more into my highest self around them has been like definitely a journey, and it's been amazing. And it's so fun. I have all these pinch me moments. Like, even so, I was living in Santa Barbara for a year, and I was working for this running apparel company that was based there, run by women. And the athletes, they were not famous athletes. They were normal, pro endurance runners, which is not that.
Sure.
Like, I would get to go into their lives, capture who they are, tell their stories, shoot them at races, I got really involved in their lives and shot them in these beautiful settings, doing really incredible things. And like, similar to Rich, I was at his house all the time. I was very involved in his life. I love being on a team with Colin. It's like I get to wear a lot of hats and do a lot of things beyond just video, and I'm part of his life, and he's a friend. And that's what I love most about all of this. It's like that I get to be in these worlds, telling these people's stories, being around it, being in a smelly van with 4 dudes, 5, 6 guys for 48 hours. And I
loving every second of it.
Loving most seconds of it.
Yeah, right. When all of this started and you were in those situations, like with Rich, for example, or some of the people where you were timid and uncomfortable and not 100% certain in what you were doing or how to present yourself, what was your pep talk to yourself? Like, how did you put yourself in those situations and fake being confident or whatever it was that you did? What was your methodology there?
It's a really good question. I fumbled more than I was successful, I will say. I mean, I had like, with Rich, I had multiple like crying on the floor moments, but not in front of him. But I think I just would keep going back to just like just like focusing on do my work, do my thing, I like reminding myself that I'm good at what I do and not to, don't let things affect me. Just like, because it would also come in waves. Like people are people have their own shit. So like in some moments I would realize that it wasn't always reflective of me. It was just like just a moment and the thing is happening and now another thing is happening and then we're here and we're there. And then like, I think it just, I'm also grateful to have had other people in my life that would reflect to me my worth and what I'm good at. And I guess to answer your question, it was mostly like leaning on other people for reminders and support and then just continuing to focus on the work and let it ride out.
Keep showing up.
Yeah.
We have had professional athletes. We've had, really high performing executive level guests. We've had high performing team leaders and thought leaders. And everyone has those moments where you're insecure and you doubt yourself. And often it's the same answer. I just kept showing up and I leaned into my support system, whether that be a supportive spouse or family member or friend, someone that you can have to be a soundboard. And it sounds like your experience in that situation was no different. That yes, I'm doing things that are big and scary and with people that I never thought I would be doing them with.
Yeah.
Just stay focused on what you're doing. Like do your job. You're great at it.
Yeah.
Don't get all caught up in your head.
Yeah. And I think like if it all works out and it all goes great, like what's the point? It has to be really challenging and push you and test you for it to be the rewarding experience that it's meant to be too. Like the first week I got out there, I started working with Rich for 2 weeks, then a wildfire tore through Malibu. I lost my house. I had nowhere to live. I didn't know anyone. His business partner decided he didn't want me to work here, that I was too expensive. And then I okay, I'm not working for Rich anymore. I'll circle back. The story does end up with I work with Rich, but I ended up like no plans, no money. And I was like, I got an invite to go, sail from Panama to Tahiti by way of the Galapagos with this couple from Ventura that had this boat that they were on social media. They were relatively well known and they took a liking to me and we, decided to go to do this together. And before we even left the marina, they kicked me off the boat because they thought that I had we went to buy some supplies at a store in town and I opened a toothbrush box thing and to test the bristles. And I bought like $40 worth of stuff, but the toothbrush like didn't make it into the basket somehow. And I literally don't remember how it happened, but I got swarmed by police. And then they were like, we don't trust you. It was such a crazy experience where I was like, and then I got kicked off the boat and I was like, okay, wildfire, got fired, flew to Panama with all of my belongings. Now I got kicked off the boat. I'm at some random Airbnb in Panama. I don't speak the language. What is happening? What do I do? Ultimately, it all worked out. I ended up going back and I ended up working with Rich and everything worked out the way it was meant to. But it was just one of those moments where I was like,
everything. Yeah, tested is a great word because everything was stacking up against you. Yeah. And when you said that you were swarmed by police about a toothbrush, the first thing that popped in my head was like the Home Alone scene where he's like, son,
is this approved by the ADA?
Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, Allie had a Home Alone toothbrush moment.
And they were like, they didn't believe me that it was an accident. They're like, well, they were like trying to figure out what my motive was. I had to go to like a judge, a jail. I was like taken all over for multiple hours that day
for a toothbrush, an accidental toothbrush.
Oh, right. And
what a nightmare. Well, and that's just another moment of like, you could have been like, this ain't for me. Like, I got to throw in the towel. This is way too much. But you
go back to Minnesota. Nope.
Right. I mean, and a lot of times I feel like you hear stories of people who do put their neck out there a little bit, try something new, take a risk. It doesn't work. I mean, that situation was sounded like a shit show. Nothing was working. It was scary, I'm sure. And it would have been easier to retreat and just be like, I'm going back to what I know. Like, this has been great, but it's too much. And I feel like, often that happens for people. And the ones that push through those turbulent times or those times that test you and again, this kind of plays into the whole like pushing yourself past limits you think exist, but like that pushed you past probably a lot of you know, points that you thought you could even handle. And you're like, I'm still here. Like, let's do this. Game on.
Because I think you just like, if you can, I remember in that moment, it wasn't like I gotta push through kind of energy, but it was more like, no, I see the thing. Like I felt the thing that I wanted. I had a taste of it. California life and working for the expansion, the like feeling in your spirit that, you know, you can have, you want, you maybe get a taste of it. You get derailed a bit by life, but you're like, no, it doesn't feel right to just like surrender that. It's like, I felt that already. I'm going for that. That's the end goal. That's the prize. That's what I know I deserve and want, and like can have. Might not look like I wanted it to. Clearly, I'm not sailing to the Galapagos this week, but like I can have that feeling. Okay, how do I? What's the other path that I take to get there? What do I try now? Like, there's always like it's so cliche, but there's always a little crumb. I remember Julie Rich's wife was texting me when I was in Panama. I was like, oh, here's the sliver, here's the crumb, here's the, like, just trusting that there's going to be something that's going to show you the next step.
Yeah. Allowing. We work on that a lot. And we have that conversation a lot, Greg and I, about just allowing things to happen as they're going to. That often when we get most disappointed or derailed, it's because we were trying to control something or make something happen that wasn't supposed to happen that way. And if we would have just let things be and not surrender, like give up, but kind of surrender to the moment and give it a little breathing room, the like solution presents itself, or the alternative presents itself. And then you know how to pivot, and you know where to cling on to and what direction to take. So you ended up back, and now you are back working with Rich. That translated then into working with all of the people that you had mentioned before.
Yeah.
Crazy story. Like
that's like the surface summary.
Yeah.
Oh
So when you meet someone and you're looking to capture their story, like we worked with you briefly trying to figure out how we could work with you with our recording in Seattle and capture the story behind it, because the story behind the music is so rich and meaningful to us. And it just didn't work out. We couldn't make it happen. It was like last minute. It was too rushed and too many things, too many barriers in the way for us to make that happen between the three of us here. But when you are working with someone, how do you know where to begin with them? Do you just kind of hang out and get a vibe for them and then kind of let that lead? Or, you know, is it more structured and almost more rigid than that? Like, here are the deliverables we're trying to capture, and then start from there. Like, what's the process look like? Because you would never, in watching what you put together, it's so fluid and so natural and so beautiful. It doesn't seem like it would be like, here's your checklist of items. So what's your process look like?
Thank you for that, by the way. Yeah, it's very, I guess, like organic, for lack of better words. It just really does depend on the person, the story, or the content, like what it is, that who they are, what we're doing, where we are, what the thing is. But overall, I would say like the through line to all of it is generally, to get to know them, whoever I'm filming, a little bit about their story, and not just like the superficial side of it. I mean, there is a little bit of that where you film I'll often spend a half day or a day with someone and just film all the things that they would normally be doing in their business or in their life, or both. Or film them depending again on the theme of the piece. There might be some beautiful nature setting and just some candid, casual, artistic B-roll, and maybe it's a voiceover piece, and maybe there's an interview. It really does depend. But for me, it has to feel organic and natural. So capturing someone in their natural element based on whatever the direction or the narrative of the piece is. And that's something that we figure out together. For you guys, it was going to be, you had something that you were doing, and then in order to tell that story in a broader way, we talked about these other little things we could capture and add on to what you were already doing. And there was an end vision sort of, and we, sometimes work on that kind of thing together. Sometimes people just want me to come up with it myself, and sometimes it's it really sorry, it's a long-winded answer where it does vary, but
just like anything else, it depends on the person and really what the desired end product is. But have you ever found like, have you run into situations where you're like, I am just totally not vibing with this? I've been hired to do this, but I can't get into it. Have you ever run into
Panama.
that? Well, obviously, I mean, that was like, I'm sure you weren't vibing with that, but
yeah,
like, the vibes off here.
Because sometimes, you feel this energy with someone and you're like, I like them. I want this to be wonderful, but there's just something that's like a little bit off. And I'm sure, when you do work with people, or especially if you're working with someone new, establishing what that vibe is, it probably doesn't always just click, like, I wish life were like that, but how do you handle and manage that? Is that something that you run into as a hurdle at all?
Overall, I would say very rarely. I think just because people who reach out to me or work with me, they know enough about my style or me, like it attracts a certain type of person. And I'm sure I've turned down, I've definitely turned down some things where I was like, no.
Yeah.
But overall, I think I'm grateful to mostly get approached by people that I do actually jive with. And then a lot of times if I'm pursuing it or it's an organic, I know this person through another means and we've already talked about working. I just keep going back to the word organic, where I'm really grateful that most of my projects have been that way. I will say there are times where I get people that are a little rigid and not very natural on camera. That's where it's the hardest, where it's like, I really don't want you to perform. Like, I don't want you to feel nervous, nor do I want you to act a different way on camera than you actually are in person and try to come off like. That's where it gets hard for me, because I don't know what, oftentimes it's not anything I can do anything about.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to hone in on like some negative experience by any means. I think just overall, like when you think about, especially when you're pursuing your own passion or you're working through for yourself and building your own business and your own connections, just the obvious experience that things aren't always awesome. Like there are hurdles, that there are obstacles. So I didn't mean to put you on the spot there and like, tell me about a horrible experience you had. I just meant more from like a zoom out, like, it does now, because you've created it this way with the people that you work with and the introductions that you have and the people you pursue, with clarity in your vision of what your company does and what you do as a storyteller. But like, sometimes just in what we do, you run into people and you're like, hey, I really want this to work, but for whatever reason, it's not. So I was just more curious than anything, especially because you do have to get so intimate with people, so behind the scenes and so involved in what they're doing to capture the essence of who they really are. If that's ever been like awkward and weird. But
overall, I'm very grateful that most of the people that I work with that I've attracted are people that have been wonderful to work with and that I jive really well with and are just natural and they're passionate. They're ready. They want to do this thing. They want to do it in this way. And that it tends to, work out really well. But as with anything, there are moments where there's different power dynamics or there's different expectations or things aren't communicated properly. It's just things you learn over time about. Now I have kind of an alert. I have not red flags, but like, I know what type of person to potentially avoid or to work with in a different way or to speak to in a different way or to have a contract for sure. Or, always, you should always have contracts, but
always contracts. Yeah. Which I'll send you yours after we're done recording for this podcast. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite type of project to work on? Do you have a favorite, or do you just love taking on the new experience?
I could answer this question like 3 different ways, but I love the variety of what I get to do. Like a retreat here, a wellness retreat in a cool, beautiful place with this type of person or this type of group of people. And then I get to go do some like really intense athletic thing. And then sometimes I'm just at home in a cozy house editing someone's story or editing some content from whatever other project I was shooting. Like I love that variety because I'm borderline introvert extrovert. Like I can't always be out shooting and in my tank, and I don't always want to just be alone in my house editing.
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I totally get it. Yeah.
But specifically in this moment, I just, like I was saying before, I really am loving this feeling. I think because I've spent so much time working alone and for myself and by myself, and I live alone, and I'm, currently single. I just, like, so much of my life is solo, that I really have been craving this sense of team and feeling like part of something, and having colleagues, sort of,
Sure.
or people to co-create with. And Colin and I have been working together in that way on a lot of things since, I mean, he and I worked together off and on for 3 or 4 years now, but since August we've been working on a bunch of stuff pretty full on, and he's got some wild adventures lately, and I'm more involved in his in what he's doing than ever before, and that feels really exciting to me. And
Yeah.
that biking thing was, that we didn't really go into that storytelling wise, but that was really fun. And just things like that, where you just don't know what's coming, but you're
Yeah.
all for it, and you love the people that you're doing it with, and
Yeah.
the variety of it all is really exciting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of the things that you capture are probably things that you may not have ever been exposed to or experienced,
Mhm.
in your own right, which I think is really, really cool, that through connecting with people and capturing their essence and their story, you get to experience the flip side of
Mhm.
that and kind of live through them, literally, like capturing their stories, kind of living through them, which is a major gift, because seeing your work and seeing what you do is so what's the word I'm looking for? Genuine, maybe, is the best
Yeah.
word. Like, it's so genuinely put together that it doesn't even have to, there's no question. Like, it isn't, I'm not trying to believe it. It's just presented in such a beautiful, genuine way that it's like, I feel like I'm right there living it, because you've put it together that way, because you are right there living it and very involved. And I just think that's really cool. It's not just I got picked up to shoot this,
Mhm.
which is probably often the case. Like, I've got to shoot and I'm going to go do what I need to do and I'm out, and then I'll edit it
Mhm.
and get it to you. It's like, I'm
Mhm.
living this. And especially like you just mentioned with Colin, like, you're involved, and that
Mhm.
feels really good to
Yeah.
be a part of. And
Yeah. And I'm hoping to do more. I used to do more of this when I had a more spacious schedule in my 20s, but like creating something that I'm passionate about and putting that out into the world, and doing it in an intentional way with, like, I really want to get back into more of that. I love my client work, but I also feel like, I guess, the artist thing, where it's like something is missing if I'm not creating something, putting it out into the world, and for people to be like, oh, that's what she does. Like, oh, I get it. Like,
yeah.
there, a better balance of that is something I'm hoping for this year.
What do you mean?
It might just be a short little thing, but I have had this vision for multiple years now. This, have you heard of the Schumann resonance, or this idea of the Earth's resonance? So the Earth's fields, like, I might be butchering the science on this if anyone out there knows more than I do about it, but it's like the 4 to 6 feet off of the Earth. There's a frequency that, based on lightning strikes and reverberations, the Earth's field has a vibrational frequency of 7.8 hertz, and that happens to be the exact same frequency as our brain waves when they're in a creative flow, alpha, rest, rejuvenate state. And it's becoming harder and harder to access the Earth's field because of all, like, Wi-Fi and cell and electromagnetics and just, the modern world. And even if you're if I'm even in Jackson and I'm on a hike and surrounded by nature, I still am not tapping into the Schumann resonance. Like, you have to go pretty far to get to it at this point. But anyways, like, there's all these biohacking tools now that can, like, give you that frequency, can emanate it in your house next to your computer, offset some of the stuff that that the world is that's in the way of that, I guess. And I just, zooming out from all that, I feel like that's such a beautiful and powerful idea, that the vast degree of vibrational frequency variance out there, and that we happen to have our brain waves and alpha state happens to be the exact same as the Earth's field. I'm not articulating this very well, but I just think that's such a powerful thing. And I want to do a creative beautiful, some sort of film piece around that. And not just simple scenery and voiceover. I want to do something. I just don't, it hasn't come into clear vision yet. I've tried coming at it from multiple angles, but never really given it the time or energy that it deserves, because I haven't had that time or energy. And I've tried to create little things with that idea along the way, like for a trail running apparel line for that company that I work for in Santa Barbara. I did a little taste of that type of project, and it went viral. Like, nothing of mine has ever gone viral, and that went viral. It's like, clearly, like, the world loves this concept. I just don't know I don't know how to make it what it could be, I guess.
So
That's
more,
wow.
Yeah, being able to take more time for you to bring your own thoughts and projects to life and work with your clients, but give yourself some more space to do that. I think that stuff like that is fascinating, and that none of us as humans typically have a lot of, well, I shouldn't say none, that's such a blanket statement, but so many people don't have the time or capacity to even give themselves the time to think about those things. So when someone like you can take a vision and make it presentable for me to watch and capture, I feel something that I otherwise don't have the time to.
Yeah.
That's special.
That's awesome.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that's how I feel about music too. You create this sound, you create this frequency, you create this emotion that either resonates or it doesn't, depending on who it is. But just the fact that you can do that through an instrument or your voice and make someone feel something is special. And you do that visually and through storytelling and through what I hope to see more of, these big idea capturing versus of a human, about human existence. Like, that's amazing. That's really cool. So that's next. What else is next? What other big projects are you working on?
Well, so this time of year for me is always, okay, I got to organize my hard drives. I got to delete this. I got to put the year gets so nuts that I can't keep up with any of the things that I need to, the foundational elements of. So the non-sexy answer is just a lot of organizational and business related things. And there's some exciting stuff coming up with Colin that I'm working on. Got a camper van this fall, so I'm hoping to take that out this spring somewhere.
Oh, right on. That's exciting.
That
plays into the whole, like, giving yourself some more time and space to explore the stories that you want to come up with. That's great.
Yeah, and with my work, it's like a week out, I might find out about a project or these little dabblings of things I'm reaching out to people about right now. Some of it will surface, some of it may not, but it's kind of I also love the wide open calendar at the moment, to be like, I have no idea what's going to be happening in February, and I'm so excited to see what does.
Yeah, that's kind of a great answer, right? Like, I don't know, I'm hanging back, I'm going to ski, I'm going to enjoy my space.
It's the opposite of depression. Like, depression's like, oh, you just dread it. But like, when you're like super optimistic and excited about what you got going on, you're like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I just know I'm going to love it. It's it's the right energy.
We need more of that. We need more, I think, in general, if everybody just had a little bit more spacious. I know it's harder for some people to do, but just the spaciousness. I think we fill our calendars, people fill their calendars too full, that there's no space to let any spontaneous gifts come in, or pivots, whatever.
Yeah, that's a really great polarized vision of, I'm big on, like, I got to make sure that we're doing these adventurous things and that we schedule them or they don't happen, right?
Yeah,
but
that too.
But back to that whole conversation of, like, allowing, though, if I keep myself so bogged down with all of these things that I'm kind of not forcing, but like making myself do, what am I missing that would just appear in the spaciousness? So that's a really great kind of concept of, like, just allowing things, give yourself some space. And I don't know what's happening and I love it. I'm here for it. That's great.
Yeah.
I do admire people who do, like, I don't know if you guys are big ass calendar club people, but have you seen Jesse Itzler's big ass calendar thing? And
I did have a calendar once. And I do have a big calendar. It's not his, but it's a big ass calendar on my wall.
It's a big ass calendar. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
like, I love that. I wish I could. I can't even begin to lay out a year, but that would be such a cool feeling to look at that and be like, oh, look at all these incredible adventures I'm doing and these things I'm pursuing. And
Some of those people go wild, man. I've seen like some posts on Instagram where they're sharing that people buy those calendars and then they fill like literally every day. And I'm like, I can't, that is extreme to me. Like that does stress me out. I love the concept though of like scheduling your life first and kind of saying, well, we're going to do this once every quarter and we're going to do one big thing a year. And, you know, a lot of Jesse's principles and the communities that you're involved in are really phenomenal things to live by. And he's impacted our life and so many others that I do love that calendar principle. But I feel like maybe like intentional spaciousness on that big ass calendar kind of fits into like what we're talking about and combining both of those things. Like just a week of nothingness, like just a week to just sit with myself and see what comes up. Hey.
I'm going to drop this little nugget. And I know, again, it's like a privileged thing that not all of us can do, but I'm what you were saying just made me think like Jesse, for example, I shoot a lot of his mentorship retreats and often it's last minute. It's like, oh yeah, we have one on February 9th, 10th. Can you come to Atlanta for this thing? And I'm like, oh, actually, because my calendar is pretty open. Yes, I would love to. I can do that. And that is the way that a lot of these high performing, highly successful people that I'm around operate. Like Colin, all of them, they plan what they need to plan, but they leave space for pivoting and spontaneity. And again, we can't all do that, but now that we're talking about this, I'm connecting even more dots in my head where it's like, that's again, like maybe a vibrational frequency of something with the way these lives. Yeah.
Feels so reckless to be like, well, I'm just going to leave space for, you know, not knowing what's going on. I feel that way. Like,
no, it's freedom.
But the most beautiful things happen. I feel like when we've taken trips or made plans to do things and they go the exact opposite, or there's space and we're not sure how to fill it, then the most beautiful opportunities present themselves. And, you know, that makes a lot of sense that it is purposeful. It's purposeful space on their calendar left open so that when those opportunities arise, bam, you can jump on them. But you have to be really flexible. I mean, I can't imagine how flexible you must be with like getting those phone calls and being like, can you be here? Can you be here? And bringing all your gear and like making all the plans. And that would stress me out. So you must have a good handle on logistics planning.
I would say it's less about me being flexible and more about me being very, well, I guess flexible schedule wise, but also very like, I always try to rent a car and I plan to go to the grocery store on my way and like I don't just at a certain point the sustainability of travel, just like going the whims of whatever you're going to, I've learned how to prepare myself as much as I can for success and like making sure I have a comfortable place to stay and I'm getting a solid night's sleep and putting boundaries around the times that I'm shooting and trying to bring someone to help as needed or like little things like that. There is a lot more of that than it might seem like.
Well, I love hearing you say that too, because I also think that that's a very relatable feeling of like, especially when you work for yourself or when you're, you know, trying to perform or fulfill a certain need you've been hired for or whatever, like this feeling of like, I have to be all of these things, or I can't set these boundaries because I have to over deliver, you know, under promise, over deliver. Not the other way, right? No, that way, under promise, over deliver. And like you establishing those boundaries is what helps you continue to thrive and not burn out, and knowing when like I'm going to burn out, I need to take some time and give myself some space is a really beautiful place to be. That yes, I understand as a privilege, and maybe not everyone has the liberty of putting such structure around those boundaries, but being aware of that as an entrepreneur and as someone who works for themselves is so important. So I'm glad that you shared that and brought that up. I think that's so wise, you know? Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, it's been an awesome experience and conversation with you, getting to know you a little bit more instead of just what you're able to do from behind the camera, but who you are as a person. It really shows through in your work that you're genuine and you're passionate about what you do and who you work with. And so thank you for spending some time with us, sharing a little bit of yourself with us and our listeners today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a gift, and I love you guys.
Yeah.